Welcome, everybody. The topic of today's roundtable is generational encounters in Arab cinema with Safar. And this is, as I mentioned to begin with, this is part of our roundtable series that we are doing with the Shubbak Festival. We are honored to partner with them on this series. So our first guest is Amani Hassan. She's the program director at the Arab British Center. Amani is passionate about arts, and particularly about Middle Eastern arts and culture. She earned her MA degree in enterprise and management for the creative arts, where her research centered on Arab women's presence in the Middle East art scene. She has since organized numerous exhibitions and cultural events promoting artists from multidisciplinary backgrounds, both in London and Doha. She joined the Arab British Center in April 2015. Welcome, Amani. Rabih El Khoury is the curator for Safar 2021 Film Festival. Rabih holds a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism from Lebanese American University in Beirut and holds a Master of Arts in Creative and Cultural Entrepreneurship from Goldsmith University in London, where he was studying where he was studying when he attended his first Safar back in 2012. He's been working with the Metropolis Association, which manages Metropolis Art Cinema, the only art house in Lebanon, since its inception in 2006 as administrator and then as a managing director. He's also worked for the Cultural Association Beirut, DC, for the promotion of Arab cinema as general coordinator for its Arab Film Festival, the Beirut Cinema Days since 2006. He's managed over 20 Arab film weeks in the Arab world and Europe. Rabih, welcome to afikra. I'm excited to have you both here. This is an honor to have two folks with different vantage points working on the same thing. It's really a pleasure to be able to look at the same subject from two different places. And I want to ask you a really stupid question, which is, those are the questions that I majored in. When did you first start liking "quote unquote" Arab film? Let's start with you, Rabih, and let's see if Amani has a different answer. Okay. So not when did you start liking film? When did you start liking Arab film?
Yeah. First, thanks for having us. And also, I want to say that no question is a stupid question. All questions are relevant. I started working with an organization called Beirut DC, so Beirut for the Development of Cinema, in 2006 in Beirut. And I was interested in films, non-commercial films, basically. And then I discovered that there is a bunch of people who really care about the cinema of our region, independent works that are coming from the region, works that I've never heard or seen, or just, I had no interest in that, basically, or I didn't know anything about that. And then I started to watch these films, discover these documentaries, these short films, these student films, these feature films, and I'm like, these films resemble our reality. These films resemble where we come from, what we go through every day. Were they from Morocco or from Palestine or from Iraq or from Egypt? They speak about particular sensitivities or particular issues that touch me, that move me, that want me to become a better person. And from that point, I started to really have an interest in discovering the cinema of our region. Basically, the cinema of the world has always been interesting to me because you get to discover other stories, other cultures, other people. But then it was important for me to discover my own culture. And through film, I was able to dive into that, actually.
Amani, what about you? I have follow-ups, but go ahead.
I guess, truth be told, I was born and raised in Paris, in France, and I have an American mom and a Palestinian dad, so I have very different cultures within me. As a child, I literally grew up watching Mickey Mouse and Disney films. That was all I was interested in. And then when I was about 9 or 10 years old, in Paris, I had my best friend who's Lebanese, made me watch West Beirut. I think I was about 9 or 10 years old, and that for me was an eye-opener. You know, it was a film about Lebanon, but it was a film in Arabic, which for me was something I totally could relate to. And from then, I think my interest started growing sort of organically. you know, watching stories about a culture that is relatable was important. And I think with the years, it kind of stuck to me. And I was lucky enough that even though living in France, you know, a lot of the content that comes out of France is French and also very much American. They do have quite a good selection of Arab films. And then, of course, when I joined the Arab British Center, you know, the Safar Film Festival is one of our major, it was one of our largest programs and one of the most important ones. And I've worked on 4 editions up to now. So that has definitely also really sort of solidified my interest in Arab cinema.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, you preempted my question, which is great because I want to ask Rabia the same one. But do you remember a film, Rabia, that sort of ignited or awakened that interest in film from the region? And was it West Beirut, or was it? I suspect it wasn't, but because that would be quite ironic if both of you have the exact same film. But was it another film?
To be honest, I can't remember because in 2006, when I started with this organization, we were preparing an Arab Film Festival, and then the July war on Lebanon happened, and we had to stop the festival, and we had to stop the organization. And in that framework, I had to see so many films because I was asked to write a booklet.
Rabia, just as a quick question, did you grow up in Lebanon?
I grew up in Lebanon, and I stayed there.
You didn't grow up watching films on television, Syrian and Egyptian films and Lebanese?
No. And that was very interesting for me because I did not connect to the culture beforehand. Maybe it was also because of where I was studying and where I was learning. I studied with the Jesuits, so I had a French school, and I didn't really have an interest in my own culture. Basically, you know that in Lebanon we still don't have a history book because nobody can. They don't have one opinion about how the war went. So our culture basically was not something that we had a general or genuine interest in. So basically my work with that festival made me see films which suddenly were relatable to me, and I had no idea how I would be, why was I so affected by watching these films? I remember I saw a film from Algeria, I saw Moroccan films, and I'm like, wow, these stories are really appealing. And one of these films that stayed with me for a while was actually the Great Journey, which is a film that we programmed last year with Amani. It's so many stories, really. I don't think I have one particular film that started the journey for me, but it was just these bits and stories and different filmmakers sharing their stories with me, which really awoke me, and it all happened basically at the same time.
Cool, great. Okay, so I want to talk about these 3 logos that I have on the screen. And for the people who can't see the screen, the Shubbak Festival, the Safar Film Festival, and the Arab British Center. Why does it make sense that I have these 3 logos on the screen? And how are these organizations or these initiatives interrelated? Maybe, Amani, you can help describe that.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start with the Arab British Center. The Arab British Center, which is the organization that I work for, we're a cultural organization, and our mandate is to further understanding of the Arab world in the UK. And we do that essentially through 3 areas. One, we have our cultural program, of which the Safar Film Festival comes from, and other programs as well. We also run a series of courses, so we have a bit of an educational side to our work. We run Arabic language, calligraphy, we do music with the Takassim Music School. They teach darbuka and oud. I think it's the only oud school in the UK today. And we also host like-minded organizations at our physical center in our building in central London. And one of these organizations is the Shubbak Festival. So actually, even though we're a separate organization to them, they're essentially our residents and our neighbors in the building. And that's how we, I mean, of course, we knew of the Shubbak Festival before they moved into our building, but shall I tell you a little bit about why we're partnering with them this year? Maybe
please. Yeah, please.
So when the pandemic hit last March, Eckhard, who's the artistic director of Shubbak, approached us and asked us if we were interested in partnering with them in some capacity for their 2021 edition, which is about to launch tomorrow, actually. And given, you know, the circumstances in which we all of a sudden found ourselves living in, lockdown, pandemic, cultural sector came to a stop. Obviously, funding, we already anticipated how funding was going to get even more difficult and more competitive down the line. We thought it was just such a natural collaboration to have. So the Shubbak Festival, they're the largest European festival of contemporary arts and culture from the Middle East and North Africa, and a big chunk of their program is film. So we said, well, let's bring Safar into the program this year and basically present the official film program under the Safar Film Festival umbrella as part of Shubbak. So I can totally see why it could be a little bit complicated for people to understand, but it just kind of made sense. You know, we support each other more than ever now. We need to come together, and it was just a very natural and organic collaboration that was meant to happen. So we're very, very happy to be with them this year.
That's great. Thanks for trying to illustrate those connections. And Rabih, you are the curator for this year's festival. How did you want to approach curating a festival that's audience is based in a place you don't live? How did you approach it? That's challenging, right? Because like you're supposed to be in touch with your audience. You're trying to help curate a meal for them, so to speak. And if you don't have the same taste buds, it's tricky. How do you approach it?
Basically, I see this as a collaboration. I'm not doing this alone. I don't take decisions alone. And this is also part of the creative process, that you collaborate with an institution that is based there, that knows the cinemas, that knows the people, that wants to present something that continues the work that they have been doing, but also presents something that is also innovative, in touch with times, addresses diversity. So all of these questions were questions that we discussed together with the Arab British Center, what we want to do, what we want to offer, and how does this edition going to look like. So I studied in London, and this was exactly 10 years ago. I discovered so many things in London, but I also saw how little things were shown in cinemas about the Arab world. And I was really happy to see that there was a festival that was launching just when I was leaving, and that was Safar, actually. So for me now to just, after 10 years, to work with Safar is for me a very, like I'm continuing a circle, you know. 10 years ago, I was really disappointed that there was not enough about the Arab world when it comes to cinemas and film. And now the work that Safar has been doing has been really groundbreaking. The work that Shubbak has been doing is really groundbreaking. And to be part of it is for me exciting. But as I said, I'm not doing this alone. I can propose millions of films, but then they don't resonate with the audience. It doesn't make any sense. We want something that works. And so that's why, and Amani has been really the most patient person alongside the team, Reem and Becky. It was all a collaborative process. We had so much talks and discussions and communications. And I think that's what made the preparation for the festival so much fun, actually, and also a learning experience for me, actually. So I want to thank them. And yeah, to answer you, I think Amani spoke a bit about the process of three institutions working together. I think now more than ever, we need such collaborations, especially in these tricky times where funding is really scarce and limited. We need to support each other, work together, and reach out to the public.
Yeah. Okay, so I totally agree. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of the festival. And this slide, there's something that screams at me when I look at this slide, right? It's chronological from right to left, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018, right? And the first thing that I notice is the posters of the older festivals are showcasing these like black and white and oil color, oil painting posters of days gone by, right? And then you get to modern pictures, modern films. Is there that arc? So in 2012, was it like more nostalgic, looking at older films from the 50s and 60s and 70s, and now there's been a specific pivot towards, okay, we want to focus on contemporary culture? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way that the festival evolved with time. It was, when it was established in 2012, it was curated by, actually 2012 and 2014 were curated by Amani Hassan. And it was very much about popular Arab cinema, which meant a lot of classic films. One edition was films that had never been seen in the UK before, whereas one was films that had barely been shown in the Arab world, let alone in the UK. And then we brought in Rasha Salti to curate the 2016 edition, and she took on, obviously, the reason why we work with curators is because, we want them to tell us, what is relevant and what is important in the actual moment. So when Rasha Salti came, she decided to take a completely different approach and put together a program of only contemporary films by new film directors that were challenging, that had never been seen in the UK, and that were important at the time, for the discourse that was going on around Arab cinema. And then in 2018, we had Joseph Fahim, who curated our 4th edition. And that one was a collaboration with Banipal magazine. And Banipal used to be also one of our resident organizations. See, there's a lot of links with our residents and the work that we do. But we decided that we were going to look at literary adaptations in film. A lot of films from the Arab world at the time were adaptations from very famous authors. And we decided to focus our edition on literary adaptation. So we had a bit of a mix of the old model and the new model in that one, where a lot of the films were classic films, but we also had a bit of a mix of newer and contemporary films.
And who's the audience typically? Like, it's what's the there are obviously the Rabias who are going to, they're at Goldsmith, they're in London, they're students, they may not have grown up there, but the Arab world is a region that they deeply care about, either because of family or because of biography or because of academic or scholastic interests. But then are there also just your Jack and Janes and randos off the street as well?
It's a mix, actually. We have really a mix of people. So from the last couple of editions, the surveys that we put together show that our audiences are, I would say, about 52 or 53% BAME, of which I think about 50% of that is from Arab ethnicities, and then the rest is...
For those of us who are not familiar with that term, which is a very UK term, what does BAME mean?
BAME is Black and minority ethnic. Cool. So which I always find these terms a bit strange, truth be told.
Yeah.
So
but just for the podcast listener listening in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. If you consider it basically that anything that's not white is an ethnic minority, then there you go. It's basically the non-white audiences are BAME, and then those who identified as white were just under 50%. And there's really a mix of ages. I think that the largest proportion of viewers are between 25 and 45. In the beginning, though, it was very different. Because we were showing classic films, the audiences were actually quite older. A lot of people who were nostalgic about the region, who come from the diaspora, were the ones who mostly attended. And now that we're kind of, like we have we do have a bit of a younger audience. I guess contemporary film also attracts a different audience in general. So. But yeah, it's a bit of a mix.
Cool. So I want to talk, Rabih, maybe you can talk us through the slate this year and what films, or maybe the easiest way to ask this question is, if you were to pick a specific theme that you were to explain to like a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old, what is the theme of this year's festival?
Oof. Well, basically, we wanted to address generational issues in this edition. Of course, when one speaks today about the Arab world, especially this year, people really tend to think about the Arab Spring, which started 10 years ago. Or whatever you want to call it, whatever the Arab Spring was, whatever it brought, whatever it generated. And so reflecting on 10 years of Arab Spring made us with the team of Safar to reflect about these inner revolutions, if you want, that every teenager has, every father of a family has, every woman is struggling with. And we really wanted to reflect on, these inner feelings, whatever you are in the Arab world, what are you facing with today? So if I were to answer your question, it's about taking the questioning of these Arab emerging generations and trying to have a look at them, trying to dissect them, trying to speak about them, and trying also to connect them with worldwide audiences. Were these people from the Arab world living in the UK, or actually white people who want to come and see the films? The films are extremely different. However, there are these little things that tie them together, which is why they are part of the same program, actually. And these are all generational questions, basically. Questions that address identity, questions that address hardships, questions that address future migration, hierarchy, conflicts between different generations. All of these questions are part of this year's edition.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question. As somebody who's, two people who've been studying this stuff and really involved in this stuff, are there like stylistic things or technical things or thematic things that really define what Arab film is? Is there an Arab school of cinema? The same way that like you could think of like the Baghdad modern art group has a specific style or a specific look. Is there if you put mute on and you didn't recognize any of the specific sites, are there clues that would say this is clearly an Arab film, stylistically or thematically?
It's a good question, but I think it's definitely you, Rabia, that can answer it.
And I don't mean his. I don't.
It's a very good
those
question.
things. I mean this in terms of a 2021 question. So as of right now, are there things that really bind these filmmakers together, where that they may look at each other and say, yeah, we are referencing the same things, we're of the same school, we're of the same generation?
What I find really interesting is that we're screening a lot of feature debut films. And that's also a way to encourage this really vibrant emerging generation of Arab film talents that are, I have to say, very creative, doing things the way they want to do things, which means very differently. I don't think there is one way to define Arab cinema today. If you look at the cinema of Sudan today, which is booming and blooming, it's unlike anything we've seen, and at the same time, it feels very familiar, you know? If you look at the cinema coming from Algeria, it's very specific, very daring, very inventive, which is completely different from what Syrian cinema has been providing today because of the crisis in Syria, because of the war in Syria. Films have been made differently. I think it would be great if we can encourage all kinds of filmmaking coming from the region. People are tending to do more experimental work. People are doing more traditional work. People are doing inventive work. People are experimenting with their stories in fiction, in documentary. And I think that's what makes our cinema very rich, very vibrant, very different. And this new generation of Arab filmmakers is really taking us far through their films and through their stories. I wouldn't say there is one Arab industry, and also it's too early to speak about an Arab industry. We're not there yet, I would say. But I would say there are so many personal efforts that are made to bring those films on the international map, and also bring films that we had never seen before on the cinematic map. A country like Sudan suddenly is very relevant.
So I want to talk about some of those examples, and maybe you can highlight some of the films that you've chosen by name, at least for people who are listening or watching this YouTube video in the coming week to actually go out and check these. So let's talk about Sudan. What is one of the films by a Sudanese filmmaker in the program this year that is representative of this new style?
Well, there are two films this year which we are screening, one of which is a UK premiere, actually. One is a feature fiction. You just showed it seconds ago. It's called You Will Die at 20. It's a film by Amjad Al-Ala. It screens at the ICA. We're very happy to have the film. Actually, this film has been presented in 2019 at the Venice International Film Festival, and Amjad won the Line of the Future award after the screening. And since then, the film has been touring nonstop. Amjad has been really giving wonderful interviews and talks about the film. What he does with this film is tell a story of a young boy who thought he was, according to a prophecy, dying at the age of 20. So basically, we go through the teenage year of that child until the moment arrives, actually. And through that, Amjad takes us onto this journey with light, with sound, with music, and with, you know, this whole society that is a clash between tradition and modernity, to tell the story of this child, actually. And it's a really, really beautiful journey. The other Sudanese film is El Sit. It's a short film by Susanna Mirghani, which also is in a way representative of the themes that Amjad has been speaking about. It's a film on what it feels to have a forced marriage, and if this new generation of Sudanese is up to follow that old tradition of being forced to marry or choosing its own future, basically. And also, I want to say that we, as part of the festival, we have a panel on these new currents in Sudanese cinema with Amjad, with Susanna, and also with Talal Afifi, the director of the Sudan Film Factory.
So I want to talk a little bit about like technological challenges and opportunities with sort of iPhone filmmaking as well. Do you have a sense of how many of these films are being either shot on phones, or just the director is the editor and the sound the writer, director, editor, producer, sound person, everything. How many of these first-time filmmakers are one-stop shops, and they're doing it completely in sort of a guerrilla fashion?
It's really different once you do a feature film that has so many co-productions.
Yeah,
that
and
has
maybe
a
not
much
the
bigger
feature
budget.
Yeah.
Exactly. When it comes to documentary, that's when you have a bit more playground to do things. And many of the films that we are screening are actually very personal efforts, very private effort, and very, how do you say, they wanted to tell very personal stories in very personal means, which meant that you did not have to have the biggest team coming on set. You didn't have a set, actually. Some people really are shooting things in their own houses. Some films that I could mention are The Swing by Cyril Aris. We see him here actually on the slide. And also the film of Zena Ahwaji, Sugar Cage. Cyril did a film about his family and his relationship to his grandfather. It's a very, very moving film, and Cyril did it himself, basically. Most of the film was done by Cyril when it comes to shooting, when it comes to editing and production of the film. Zena did a film in which she followed her parents at home for 7 years as the war in Syria was escalating. So she was discovering her parents again. She was discovering their house in Damascus over these 7 years, and she did most of the work also on her own. So it's different ways of doing films, and I won't want to say that it's not because this filmmaker did a film with lesser means or with a less big of a crew, that means that this film is less important than others which have a bigger budget. Sometimes it's on the contrary. There are films that really speak to you much more because of this intimate feeling of doing the film. Yeah. And these two films are very moving films. They're both part of our online program.
Amani, the process of changing curators, how much does it what is that process like of, choosing a new curator, is it choosing theme and then finding a curator and saying, hey, this is the theme we're looking for? And that's the first question. The second question is, as a center, what does the Arab British Center hope to achieve with Safar? What does success really look like for this type of festival?
Okay. So question number one, the curators. For us, it's the other way around, actually. We find the curator and then we let them tell us what the theme should be. But we've worked, the reason why we work with different curators for different editions is because for us, it's important to have different perspectives. It's also important for us that we work with somebody who is from the region and bring in their perspective to the festival. So I think we did something a bit new in 2019. Is we launched an open call to find the next Safar curator, and Rabih applied. And in the application process, we asked people to give us, a general idea of what they think the theme should be for the next edition. And so a lot of people applied, and Rabih stood out. Because he already had this generational sort of encounters or dialogue in mind. And so he's based in Berlin, and we had so many people come and do face-to-face interviews. And then we had Rabih on Skype, he had us at hello, basically. We knew that he was the one that we wanted to work with. Personality-wise, ideas-wise, it was definitely the perfect match. So now we've worked with him on 2 editions, actually. Maybe we'll talk about the digital edition later on, or so essentially last year in September 2020 should have been the 5th edition of the physical festival. But of course, pandemic. So all the venues that we work with, because that's something I forgot to mention when you talked about audiences earlier, is we actually work in partnership with venues across London and in the UK as well. And so the ICA is one of them. It's the Institute for Contemporary Arts. We work with the Institut Français, who have a beautiful cinema in central London. This year, we're also working with the Barbican. What was my point? I forgot what I was saying. Oh, the digital edition. So we ended up having to. I'm sorry, it's Saturday. I have to put my work brain on the Saturday. We decided it was such a hard decision. You know, we had already hired Rabia. We knew that we had to do something. You know, whether there was a pandemic or not. Like we just had to put something on. We didn't want, you know, Safar to not happen. So we decided that we were going to just do an online edition, and we were just going to do a smaller program because we had no idea if people would accept the idea of a film festival happening online. This was, you know, everything was just so new. All our programming went digital, and we had no idea if people were going to follow. So we did a program of 5 films with 5 live talks. The theme was Safar from home, which in a way was the irony, considering that everyone was stuck at home and Safar is a journey. But they were one of the benefits that we found actually of offering a digital program is that you're not limited geographically. Our festival historically has always happened in London. We do have plans, and we did have plans to expand. We have in the past, and we'd like to continue doing so in the future. Still, this year it was just too complicated. But you know, going online meant that we had people from all over the UK registering and signing up to watch the films from north to south, west, east, everywhere. And we learned actually that this was something that we wanted to keep for future editions, and which is why this year we're going with a hybrid program. So a lot of our screenings are in the cinemas. We have about 12 screenings in the cinemas, but then we have another program of 5 online films and online talks. The films, unfortunately, are only available to watch in the UK, distributor restrictions, unfortunately. But the program of talks, anybody can join from anywhere in the world. And I think for the next editions, I think this is just how we're going to deliver our festival. You know, we want to continue giving access to Arab cinema to people outside the London borders. So as much as we can, that's the way that Safar is shaping for the next editions. What does success look like for us? That's a very good question. I think, you know, bringing in new audiences is a success. We are a small festival, and you know, we are limited in terms of funding. So that means that we technically have the budget to screen films once. And, you know, we are limited with the cinema capacities as well, of course. So success is seeing literally bums on seat. We want to see a full cinema when we launch a screening, but also, you know, it's important for us. We always hand out surveys, whether it's the online events, the online films, or the physical screenings. We want to learn about our audiences, and we want to find out, you know, if they're first-time visitors or if they're long-term friends of Safar. So, you know, for me, success comes in very, very small steps, but you know, changing. If I'm able to find that one person has changed their mind about the Arab world after watching one of our films, that for me is success. I don't think I would quantify it with numbers. I would quantify it with like more long-term impact that it has on people, or the power that film can have to change one's mind about a particular region. And that's why we do what we do.
Rabih, how about you? Because it's an interesting, because there could be a whole different set of answers, right? Another set of answers could be, and none of them are more right than the other, but a set of answers could be something along the lines of platforming young artists, platforming young filmmakers, creating a centralized space for filmmakers from around the region to meet each other and create this shared aesthetic and shared vision and shared ideal. There could be an idea around taking European filmmaking techniques and values back to the Arab world and having this be an incubator for other artists. It could be about whatever. There's like a million different things. I wonder for you if it's the same thing, which is really taking the UK audience and trying to educate and to educate them about their world through film. Is that similar goal?
For me, I always have problems with the word educating. I don't want to educate anyone, basically. What I think also what Amani has been saying is maybe open up perspectives, allow people to see things differently. You had this, with the migration crisis, people were just seeing things on television all the time.
Yeah.
And with a program like Safar, actually, we give the audience the chance to see real stories made by filmmakers who tell their stories. All the dreadful things that have been happening in Palestine this year are very much reflected in the festival. And this is also something that we wanted to highlight. It's basically giving you these intimate, these personal, these real stories made by artists who live these situations and are not a correspondent coming to cover what is happening in Gaza or what is happening in Syria or what is happening with the Tahrir Square, basically. So for me, I would say it's more opening up perspectives, allowing people to reflect together, to think together. And I really don't mind who the audience is because, there are so many Arab people who don't know their own culture. And if they come to the festival, this for me is huge. And as Amani said, there are people who just come because they've heard of this film, they saw a review or whatever, and they end up seeing several films in the program. This for me is a real success, if you allow people to, basically you're offering something to the people. And if people are, going on this journey with you, this for me is something that makes you want to give more, that makes you want to offer more. And for me, I would say it's more of a conversation with the public. And if the public goes on this journey with us, then of course, this is how things work.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We always do also, sorry to interrupt. One of the things that we do as well is we always have, after each screening, we always bring in the film director so that audiences have a chance to ask their questions and understand, the making behind the film and the reasons why the films were made, etc. Which I think for us is really important too. It's not just about showing a film and then, ma salame and thank you for coming. It's we want to create this dialogue between the directors and the people. So this year, unfortunately, none of them are flying in because of all the complications around traveling, but Rabih will be here and we're organizing live Q&As on Zoom in the cinema. So we'll be in the cinema room and then the film directors will be live wherever they are in the world. Yeah.
I've been to a screening recently and that was the format and it was really effective.
Yeah.
It's actually, in some ways, at least you can see their face bigger.
Yeah.
Than when they're just sitting on the stage.
Yeah, it's going to be a first for us, but I'm just really happy that, of course, there's a whole atmosphere around the festival, and it's an experience, right? You experience meeting with people, and of course, for us, it's important for the other directors to meet each other, and we organize all kinds of events and industry talks and all of that. This year, it's just obviously not possible, but at least we are giving them the time. And the opportunity to continue these discussions with people. So,
okay, so cool. So I'm curious about how this integrates into the broader film program of Shubbak, because I know that they also have other films as a part of their programs. That's right.
Yes, they do. So how does it? Well, it's.
Oh no, that's not my question.
Okay.
So my question is, basically, do you have a sense of some of what films they also have on their program, and how how they may differ, and how that sort of may juxtapose to the films that are currently in this very curated list?
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I don't. I have seen their program, and I know that they have films. I know that they have a film from Qatar, but I honestly I don't remember what they're about. A lot of them I think are by young artists, and they form part of the Shubbak program. But I'm gonna have to admit I can't tell you more about that.
Yeah. That's fine. Okay, cool. So I have a sort of nuts and bolts question about this, because typically when I think of festivals, you know, the way you described it is the way I think of it, right? Where it's like everyone's in the same place, we have name tags and badges, and you feel like you're all there. For those of us who are not very familiar with the way London is structured, are these screens all very close to each other? Are they, does the proximity create a sense of momentum and a sense of closeness, intimacy?
Well, so no, London is a huge city, and the three venues that we're working with are completely different. One is the Barbican, which is a huge venue. They have cinemas, they have performance halls, they do all kinds of things, and they're in the northeast. Then we have the ICA, who's the Institute of Contemporary Arts. They are a little bit more central, located just next to Buckingham Palace. Again, very different audiences. And then we have the Institut Français, which is in South Kensington, which is southwest. A lot of francophiles, but you know, people that actually really do love going to the movies. So all very different audiences, but yeah, it just kind of means that the festival itself doesn't have like a hub, but we're not like an industry festival, if you know what I mean. So it was more important for us to work with different venues because we access their audiences as well, and they're all very different, and that for us is really important. And also, I can tell you from living in London, people tend to be very local. So if they're feeling lazy, somebody who lives in South Kensington is not necessarily going to go all the way to Barbican unless it's a film that they really, really want to go see and they're a dedicated human being. So that's why we're giving, you know, different locations the chance to screen different films, and we're screening different films in each venues. So.
Okay, one final question for Amani, one final question for Rabih. Amani, how is COVID changing the logistics of hosting these screenings? Like, how many people are allowed to be in the venues? Are like disaster? How does it work?
Yeah, so it's it's really disaster for the venues, to be honest. It's social distancing measures, which means that cinemas are operating at 50% capacity. You know, of course, you have to wear a mask. You have to leave more time in between each screening because you have to do special COVID cleaning protocols, etc. So yeah, of course, it's sad that, you know, the ICA, for example, on a social distancing, a full house means 60 or 70 capacity for, you know, screening one film, which is you know, it's sad, but at the same time,
that's like my living room. That's my living room 2 years ago.
You must have a really big living room. The Barbican, on the other hand, I think in their cinema one capacity is like 380. So on social distancing, it's 170, which is good. But yeah, I hope people are ready to come back to the movies. I know I am. I'm actually not watching all of the films ahead on purpose because I want to sit in that cinema room They don't serve popcorn, which is probably the American in me, but those venues don't serve popcorn, which I'm very upset about. But I just can't wait to sit and actually watch a film inside the cinema and have that experience that so many of us have been waiting for so long. And I hope, I hope people come back and come and see the films.
Great. Okay, Rabih, two-part question. One is, the first part is, do you feel like global audiences have become increasingly interested in Arab film since 2006, since you started working in the region around this type of stuff? That's the first question. And the second question is, what are the sort of structural things that you hope change that would improve, accelerate, and benefit Arab cinema over the next 14 years, 15 years, that are sort of holding things back?
Well, if I may start with the second part, basically our governments, our ministries of culture, our cultural support system in our countries in the Arab world have to have an interest in supporting not just cinema, but supporting culture. In Lebanon, for instance, the Ministry of Culture has the smallest percentage among all other ministries, I think it's important to support culture, to support filmmakers, to support artists to tell their stories, and not just rely on Western funding. That's for me essential in bringing our stories with local funding, which is, there are so many funds in the Arab world, Al Mawrid, Afaq, all of these institutions that, the Doha Film Institute, all of these institutions that are supporting filmmakers. But institutional fund, unless you look at Tunisia or Morocco, which are very specific, there is no institutionalized funding, which is really a problem for me. And this makes the process be a much longer process because you have to go to Europe to find your funding opportunities. I would hope that our countries have an interest in our culture and in our artists in their stories as well. So I would say this answers the second part of your question. With the first one, having been based in Europe for a while now, I think Europeans are more and more interested in the stories that are coming from the Arab world because they are also tired of all these generic stories that they read or they see on television and in the news, and they want something more authentic. And what Amani has been mentioning, bringing filmmakers and artists, this exchange actually is not just with a film, but with a filmmaker as well, with a talent, with a producer, with an actor, with a sound designer, whatever it is. All of these stories bring you closer to the people of the region. And I feel by doing festivals, some people say, oh, this is just another Arab film festival. I'm like, yes, but this is just like you have a Latin American festival or a Chinese festival. For the local audience, for the people who belong to this community, this is very important, but also for the people who do not belong to these communities, this is also a journey for you to take, to discover, to take part, to cherish, to enjoy, to feel sad, compassionate, whatever it is. And that's the richness of the Arab world. So for everyone who's listening, if you are missing the cinemas as we do, just come see us, and we hope to give you a flair of the Arab world through this edition.
And if I can just add one more point, I think for us, we've realized throughout the years that there's definitely space to run the Safar Film Festival on an annual basis. At the moment, it's running every 2 years. But we're now talking internally about bringing this as an annual event because there are so many films out there that are being made. And one edition, Safar is still the only festival in the UK that works with pan-Arab cinema. You have dedicated festivals like the Palestinian Film Festival, you have films within Shubbak Festival, you have the BBC documentary Arabic Festival, but none of them is pan-Arab. And, for us, it's just the opportunities are there. And I think definitely the demand is there as well. So, if we get the funding, it's definitely one of our biggest aspirations for the coming years.
Cool. Well, thank you to you both for sharing your knowledge and your perspective and introducing us to Safar. For those of you who don't already follow the Shubbak Festival, you can go and find all of the information on social media or on their website. The same goes for the Arab British Center and the Safar Film Festival. These are very Googleable things, so just type them into Google, you will find everything that you need. And Amani, Rabih, thank you so much for joining today's conversation. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having us, Mikey, and yeah, thanks for doing that on a Saturday when I know that people are busy, so it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks so much. So this will be on the website and on the YouTube page and on the podcast in a few days. So if you'd like to send it to anyone you know, you can find it there. Go to afikra.com for the rest of the information that you need, and enjoy your day or night. Bye, everybody.
Bye.